Hey friends, Kim from Stamping Imperfection. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I would love to have you click subscribe if you're new here and click the bell to get notifications every time I upload a new video. So I created this card yesterday, and I created this little scene with this sweet little critter, and I did a background technique using one of the word die sets that I have, and I really thought it came out to be very cute. I love the tone on tone technique I used for that background, and I decided I wanted to create a separate card using just that technique. And I think it's a very elegant when you do a tone on tone technique. That sweet little critter scene just adds a little softness to the whole thing. And of course, I had the chance to use my tri-blend markers and some distress oxide ink blending, so that's always fun too. So here's the die set that I use. This is the Close to My Heart thin cuts called For You. You can see it's got 4 different words. The U, those are separate letters, so when you die cut those out here, you can see they come out as 3 separate letters. Then it's got the thanks, the love, and the for in script, and those come out as complete words. So there's a lot of different ways you can combine these to make the sentiment for the front of a card, or to make titles for the inside or for your scrapbook layouts. And I love that I can also use this for different techniques to create my background like I'm going to show you here today. So this is able to really be used for a lot of different things, and that stretches your stash. So this is the Forest Critters stamp set. This was the December Stamp of the Month stamp set, which means that I got this for $5 because I placed a qualifying order, which means I spent $50 before shipping and taxes. I was able to add this to my order for $5. You can still get this. It's $19.95 now, but there's a new stamp of the month for this month. So every month there's a new stamp of the month that you can get for $5 with that qualifying order. So I love being able to get something on sale every month that's different from month to month, that I can add to my stash, because again, that's a stamp set I'm going to be able to use on cards and in scrapbook layouts. So I'm going to be playing with that die set right now, and I've got a whole bunch of white cardstock scraps. So this is another reason why I love this. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to take the word love, and I've got 2 pieces of white cardstock together there. So I cut out 2 at a time because that works in my little tiny die cut machine that I keep on my desk. And I'm going to cut out a whole pile of these. So I'm just going to keep going until I have a good size pile that I know will cover the front of an A2 size card. I'm going to cut a panel down to 4 by 5 1/4, and I'm just going to keep cutting these out for a few minutes, and I'll do that off camera. So here you can see I've got a nice pile of those words. And I just did one word. You could use all the words if you wanted to, but I want to do love you on this card. My mother's birthday is coming up in a couple of weeks, and I thought that this would be a really sweet card for her. So I'm just using my liquid glue, and I really like this liquid glue. This is the Tombow Mono liquid glue, and I use both Tombow glues. This is the clear one. And there's also the one that's in the white and green container. I've been using these for years. I feel like they're cost effective. They work well for all the projects that I make, and they last a long time. So I added a little bit of that liquid glue to the back of my first word here. And you can see that I placed it toward the top of the card, hanging off the card. I always like to start the first row hanging off the top edge of the card, and it'll probably hang off on the right hand edge of that card as well. So you can see I'm using a really nice pair of reverse tweezers. These tweezers, you push to open them, then release to clamp them shut, and they hold whatever you're trying to use there for you. So it's like you're not trying to squeeze those tweezers the whole time you're adding glue and putting them down. And I like them. If you have sore hands, these are perfect. So reverse tweezers, if you don't have them, definitely put them on your wish list. They aren't very expensive and they do give you more crafting time during the day because they do save your hands there. So since I'm adding glue on the back of this, I definitely want to put some scrap paper down here so I don't get glue all over my tabletop. And I'm just going to keep going, and I'm just going to keep adding these across. And I'll be very careful. I try to hold it someplace where I know I'm not going to want glue, and I try not to add glue where I know it's not actually going to cover the card panel. So again, this card panel is cut down to 4 by 5 1/4. So it's an A2 size. And I'm just laying that down, and you can see it's hanging off quite a bit. So I'm going to take my scissors and just run them along the edge of that paper and trim off the part that's hanging over. And I'm going to use that part to start the next row. And I make a little mistake here, not so much a mistake as I forget that I need to space everything, and those L's are pretty tall. So I put this down to start my second row. And when I go to pick up my next one, I realize, the L's are tall. I'm going to need to put that down a little bit more. So here's where I'm thinking, oh, yep, going to have to do that. So I'll pull that, the OVE off and stick it down a little bit farther. The glue stays wet for a little while with these, which means I have some wiggle room time, which is one of the reasons I really like the glue. Some of the other really popular glues I feel like don't give me enough wiggle room time. So I just pulled it off, I moved it down, and you can see off to the right I have my T-square ruler, and I'm not measuring every word to make sure it's perfectly spaced, but I am going to use that T-square ruler to make sure that I'm getting the lines straight. So that's what I use it for. While my glue is still wet, I'll make sure, and I'll just continue like this till I get all the way to the bottom. So I just continued in that fashion till I got all the way to the bottom, and here's my finished piece. So you can see the stuff hanging off. I always trim it from the back, and I just kind of push my scissors up against the edge of the paper and then trim off the bits from the front that are hanging off. It's a really nice way to make sure you don't cut that bottom paper, which I so carefully trimmed so that it's nice and straight and square. So I just want to cut those letters. And then I have this really pretty tone-on-tone background. So I'm going to throw the little bits away, but I have a couple extra love words that are complete that I will actually use on my finished project. I do like to put this aside so I can go ahead and let it dry, and I have an adhesive eraser. When it's all dry, I'll use that adhesive eraser if there is any adhesive that's squished out around the words and letters. I don't want that adhesive to show up on the outside of my card. So when it's all dry, so wait for till the whole thing is dry, because that liquid glue, believe it or not, does actually make the letters and the paper feel wet. So you want to let that dry. And while it's drying off to the side, I'm going to take care of the letters. I want to put love you with the extra letters. So I had some of the YOUs left from that first project with the little deer on it. So I decided I wanted them to be colorful. You could do it all tone on tone if you want to. And ordinarily what I do is I take my ink pad and like pull it across a piece of white cardstock, but I already had the letters colored, or excuse me, cut. I already had the letters cut, so I decided I would attempt to color them this way. And I do tend to get it all over my hands when I do it in this order. It's like failure to plan that out beforehand, but I didn't want to waste these letters either. So I'm just kind of trying to color them all in, and at some point I will pull out my ink blenders and go ahead and finish coloring that in on top there. And I'm just kind of rubbing the edge of my tweezer, and that's working pretty well. I actually like the final effect that I got. So here's how I store my foam blender pieces. I got that idea from my friend Erin Jacobson, who is actually my upline. And those are little vinyl coin holders that I got from Amazon, and that little fridge bin, which is 2 inches wide, works perfectly. So I labeled them with my label maker, and each color has its own coin holder to hold the foam. So that's working really well for me, actually. My Distress Oxides, I have Velcro on the bottom of the ink pad that holds the foam on the bottom of the ink pad. That works really well for those because they have kind of a deep well around the bottom of the ink pad. So I'm leaving the Y, O, and U aside to dry. I very carefully finished inking them with the foam blender. I'm doing the same thing with Scarlet ink. The blue is Sapphire, the red is Scarlet, and I'm just kind of smushing it on. I'm trying to be very careful not to rip the letters. And as I'm adding ink, the ink is damp, and so those letters are damp. I'm going to put those aside to dry. And while they're drying, I'm going to cut out some extra letters. So I cut out 2 of each of these letters, and I'm just going to glue the letters all together so that I have 2 white U's, and then I'll put the blue U on top. So I have 3 layers all together. This makes my sentiment a little bit thicker and sturdier as I'm handling it, and it also actually gives it more dimension. And I like the splotchiness of the Y, O, and U because it almost looks like a variegated ink blend up close, because it's not actually white, it's actually just lighter blue in those places. And because I liked the variegated look, I did not continue adding ink. If I hadn't liked that, I would have kept blending the ink on with my blender till I had the same shade all around. But I kind of like that. So I have a little sand eraser there in case I get any ink smudges, which I tend to do occasionally. So I will use that at the end when everything is dry, then I will get any ink smudges off. But it was just a little tiny one. So it came off pretty quickly. And I'm just using that same liquid glue to attach my letters, and I'm putting them right over top of that background. And I'm putting them in the lower left hand or the lower right hand corner because I'm sort of using the rule of thirds loosely here. So I'm putting them in the bottom third and the right third of my card. I find that actually very visually pleasing. So that works for me that way. Hopefully it works for other people looking at the card. And the rule of thirds is pretty interesting. I'll have to do a video on that one of these days. I've done some classes on it for people. And then I'm putting the love right over the top. Now that's only got 2 layers. I had 1 extra love cut out, and that is my card. I love the way it came out. I just simply glued that top panel on a card base, and that completes my card. Thank you so much for watching, friends. I'm going to put the links below. I'm going to put a clear block on there to give everything time to actually dry. So that's the 4U Thin Cuts and the Forest Critters stamp set, which are both still available at Close to My Heart. And I will put the link to my store below, so you'll be shopping in my store at Close to My Heart. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope this inspires you to do a little crafting today.